Thanks, listeners, for joining us today. It is Tuesday, and that's the day we set aside to get caught up on Elko City news. And today we're pleased to feature just in time for the first official day of spring. It's James Wiley, and James is our Elko City Parks and Recreation Director. Welcome to the program, James. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, this is a perfect time to talk about all the beautiful amenities that we enjoy as a community. In fact, as a region, I know those kind of discussions are really important to the future and stewardship of things like our city swimming pool, because these are facilities and amenities open to people all across the county and visitors alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it is the City of Elko, but I consider us the hub of Elko County, and this is where all the action takes place. Not all of it, but most of it. And so, yeah, we do welcome county residents that live outside of the city to come and use our facilities as well, and we're happy to have them.
Well, probably the most beloved facility, and the one we're going to start off the conversation with, is the latest update in pool construction. We were kind of hoping to maybe break ground this month, James, but it's not within the city's purview.
Yeah, so I think that's still the plan. Sometime in April is what I have heard is the anticipated groundbreaking, and I know they're still working and doing a lot of things behind the scenes and in preparation of that. So crossing my fingers that groundbreaking is still on the docket for sometime this spring and we can get moving on that project.
Of course, we're talking about the Boys and Girls Clubs of Elko, Recreation Center, and Aquatic Center. Those are adjoining facilities in the vicinity of the existing city swimming pool. What you do know, James, is that we are keeping the indoor pool open. It's limping along for now, right?
It is, yeah, and I'm glad to say that it is. It doesn't come without the headaches, the daily headaches, but Nikki and Mandy are working together over there and their staff, and they're doing a great job in keeping the doors open. It's not always ideal, but at least we have a place to use in the meantime.
Now, the outdoor pool will not be available for summer, or do we know if that's going to happen? Or?
No, the outdoor pool has passed on.
It's dead, okay.
So in order to get that working again, we would have to completely start over. A lot of the problems stem below ground. And so that would be a big undertaking. And with the new pool online and due to be constructed, it just doesn't make sense to go spend that type of money right now. I do know the Boys and Girls Club have talked about incorporating that outdoor pool into the new facility, and we're working on that with them right now. It looks like that would be more along the lines of leasing the property to them, and then they could incorporate that into the new construction at some point in time, if not on all at once.
All right, so that is part of the initial plan. We were to get an update from Boys and Girls Club at the most recent meeting last week, but they ended up tabling that agenda item. It did say specifically about a financial ask, James, and just to give the city an opportunity to talk about what you may know about that.
Yeah, so that's my understanding, that he was going to come to the council and do some sort of ask for either finances or help with construction. That could mean both finances and help from Public Works or something like that. So I'm not exactly sure what the details were in that, but I think he is preparing a little more and is prepared to come back at a later date, possibly this next meeting. I haven't heard yet.
They probably wouldn't start breaking ground, though, without doing a presentation, James?
No, and I know he's talked about breaking ground in April. I'm not sure if we're quite there yet with all of the fine details that come with a big project like that, such as an actual building permit. So I don't know where we're at in that process, but I know that they've been working to finalize designs. They've also been doing a significant amount of fundraising in the meantime. So we'll just have to wait and see what Rusty has in his presentation to get more details on that.
Yeah, it is a private-public partnership. It is using city resources and facilities, but again, it's a huge savings. That's why the city has essentially turned the project over, James, because the idea is that the Boys and Girls Club would not have to pay prevailing wage.
Correct. So if the city was doing it on their own, we are subject to that prevailing wage because of the amount of cost that comes with a project like that. I do know that Reno's been, over in the Reno area, there's a couple of municipalities over there that have been planning for new pool builds, including the city of Reno. and it's been quite challenging for them. I know some of those have bid at least 2 times, or they're going on the second round, and they've come in so over budget that they've had to postpone or delay some level of construction on those. I think they're moving along though finally, but it's taken a long time, and it's at a high cost. I mean, I believe one of those pools over there that bid the last go around was to the tune of $60 million. So way over their anticipated budget, and that has a lot to do with inflation and the cost of goods and the demand on goods. It's made a construction environment pretty difficult. But one benefit that will come from us partnering with the Boys and Girls Club is we can not have to look at those prevailing wages, which are significant. If I'm quoting this right, it's somewhere in the tune of 35% just extra to cover those prevailing wages. So that's a big chunk when you're talking a multi-million-dollar project.
Yeah, we heard those same figures, James. You're right, 35%. Closer to home, Winnemucca, I think, is also putting final details on their pool, and I don't know that they've gone out to bid yet, but they're also anticipating a new project.
Yeah, I don't know too much about their plans, but I believe they're probably in a little bit better boat than we are in terms of age, but still they have an aging facility over there. And, once they get to a certain point, it does make sense to move forward and just start over, because you'll just have perpetual maintenance costs. And eventually you're going to get to the point where you have to start over. And that's where we're at with our pool. And that's why we haven't gone forward with doing a lot of expensive repairs on that outdoor pool. We're anticipating a new facility, and I think that's where the resources need to be steered to right now. We're definitely at that point where our poor pool that served a great life here is at its end, and it's time to say goodbye.
To retire it and move on. So again, that's the best partnership, again, with the private nonprofit, which is the Boys and Girls Clubs, to get the most money for that and the biggest build, and that's where we are. And soon the Boys and Girls Club will roll back the curtain and we'll see the latest iteration, hopefully. I know they're looking at a geothermal resource too, and that's a multi-million-dollar project. Maybe some federal money could be available for that. We hear there's an emphasis from Catherine Cortez Masto's office on geothermal right now.
Yeah, and typically those are projects that there are a lot of different grant funding options for, because it is, the type of energy that it's being spent on. Geothermal is a great asset as long as it functions in a proper manner. The current geothermal system that we have is old and aged and in dire need of repair as well. So we've been on boilers for a few years at the pool, and our energy costs are really expensive. So if you have a proper functioning geothermal resource, it does make a lot of sense to rely on that, because your costs of operating that facility are drastically reduced. It eventually would pay for the upfront investment on that.
Wow, incredible. So in those kind of savings, again, with the geothermal, reinvigorated, repaired, it's at least 30 years old. It was before its time when it was constructed. There was a private line and a public line. It used to heat the old hospital when it was located there on 13th Street or College Avenue, and the convention center benefits from it, the high school, I believe. So there's some significance in repairing that, but it will take millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's not a cheap project to rehab that and get it back to where it needs to be. But as a long-term goal, as far as sustainability and managing a facility the size of the new rec center or the pool, it's a great asset to rely upon. And even, as you mentioned, the high school, I believe the college has some level of that. City Hall was heated by that at one time, in our swimming pool. So a lot of users are on that, and hopefully somehow, some way, we can all come back together and reinvigorate that.
James Wiley is our City of Elko Parks and Recreation Director, and we're talking about spring sports, if you're ready to leap right in.
Yeah, it's the season. I think it was a cold lead up to the spring season, but this week has sure been nice. We start planning for spring sports usually around February, and we met with all of our user groups for the year. But spring sports especially is Elko Little League baseball and softball. We have a number of soccer associations that that we facilitate here in Elko, and we also have an adult softball program. So those are the big players. As far as the youth sports, they've pretty much had their registrations, their tryouts, and their drafts, and that sort of thing. And I believe most spring sports will be in full swing as soon as spring break is done. And then they usually get into their full schedule of spring schedules and season end schedules with tournaments and such. So we did host a couple of high school baseball games last weekend. I didn't know if we were going to get those in or not, but turned out really good, and we were able to host those and get through those. So springtime sports in Elko is tough. It can be pretty miserable outside. So I've froze my tail off in a number of years going through baseball here in Elko County with my son. Still enjoyable, but weather is usually not so kind. So we've got a ways to go, but we seem to always get through those schedules. So.
Were you able to do those baseball games at the sports complex, James?
No, we played these up on the Kump Fields and Newton Field. So the city does facilitate high school baseball and softball for Elko High. And baseball uses Upper Kump Field, and the girls softball utilizes Newton Field. And they're in close proximity to the school, so it makes a lot of sense, and it's a little more convenient for them. We had talked about earlier on in the year, we were planning on displacing a couple of sports fields within the city, and that would have increased the need to build more fields down at the new sports complex. So we do have a full-on design for a phase 2 down there that would include 3 more fields, softball and baseball, and 1 full-sized field for the high school baseball as well.
So that'll be there if necessary, but we don't want to get anybody alarmed. Kump and Newton are safe.
Yeah, they're staying, and these locations, they're encumbered through federal grants, and so they need to stay parks in one form or another. If you disrupt those, there's what's called a conversion process, and you have to go purchase new, not previously owned ground by the city. We'd have to buy new ground that either is equal in the amount of an appraised value of what we're displacing or exceeds it. And so that's a pretty significant process to go through. And, one of our goals is to maintain and preserve park and open space within the city limits. So sometimes that gets disrupted a little bit, and I'm not saying that it will never change, but that's kind of the process that you'd have to go through to change, to get out of those encumbrances on those properties.
That's funny that you mentioned that too, James, and we don't need to revisit the whole thing, but from what I understood too, the Northeastern Nevada Museum, they were looking at expansion, but that park is encumbered as well? It
is. It does have an encumbrance on it, and the city is still working with them to see how we can navigate through that. If they do want to do an expansion, it will require a conversion, which will mean we will have to pick up the amount of ground we disrupt, and we'll have to replace that somewhere else within the city.
Oh, interesting, because the Wanamaker Wing, that was done, I think, in the 90s, and then we relocated the entire Sherman Station and plunked it down in the park, and we probably didn't know about those encumbrances, frankly. I mean, that was before you, I think.
Yeah,
in all fairness,
and so
James,
there's a lot of, I mean, the devil's in the details with those grants, and, I think it's human to not pay complete and total attention to those. And a lot of our parks were built with those funds. Where our swimming pool sits currently is also encumbered. And we're not talking significant amounts of money in forms of grants, but even any amount that's awarded as a grant will incur an encumbrance on that ground. And the idea is that they'll be preserved. And it's mostly for outdoor recreation. And so indoor things like the museum or an indoor rec center and swimming pool, that would disrupt that whole encumbrance and force us down a different road. So that's why we moved off of those ball fields down to a chunk of parkland that was not encumbered. and so we can still get to the same goal at the end of the day and have our rec center and swimming pool.
Yeah, and within walking distance is certainly for kids that live in those neighborhoods too. And James, I could talk to you for another hour because there's so much, and we appreciate the opportunity to catch up on this. I wanted to make sure you got to finish spring sports before we get to a different topic.
Yeah, I think I've said enough on that. If anybody is interested in contacting these organizations, I know that Little League has a Facebook page. It's Elko Little League on Facebook. You can get a lot of information on there. If you have any questions about soccer or adult softball, you can also contact the Boys and Girls Club because they are the ones that manage those leagues for our community.
And the golf course is open, is that right?
Yeah, the golf course opened yesterday around noon, and we had a full crew for the afternoon up there. It was very busy and nice to see people getting out. So spring fever has definitely caught on. Hopefully it lasts for a few more days or a few more weeks. But it's nice to see it open in March. I would say that this is not typical. I think as long as I've been here, this is only the second time that we've been able to open this early. But we always leave it open as an option. So Mother Nature has to cooperate a lot with us to make this happen. And even with these nice warm temperatures that we have, the golf course, the turf, and the trees still haven't woken up. They're still in that semi-dormant stage. And so we just ask our patrons, we want you to come out and have a good time and enjoy the golf course, but we also want you to respect the fact that, take care while you're out there. And for instance, at the driving range, we put out mats this time of year, and most golfers would prefer to hit off of the grass, but the grass hasn't even woken up. So please use the mats right now. Let's let the grass perk up and wake up, and then we'll convert over there to the grass in a few weeks. But we are fully open. Bar and restaurant are open. Pro shop is open. Driving range is open. So go up and enjoy. While the weather is good, go up there and get some rounds in.
That's fantastic, James. That's always happy to have that early opening, and you have a full golf course advisory board. You have an emphasis on youth sports, which is something that was really a goal of yours as well.
Yeah, so speaking of the advisory board, we have a meeting on the 29th. We had some members move, and unfortunately we had one member pass away. And so we've been trying to fill those positions, and we're finally going to get down to having a meeting. So there's a lot to discuss on the 29th. We will be going over all the revenues and the statistics for the year, and I can say we did pretty well in terms of revenue and statistics. It's not bad. It's pretty good. However, with that, we do need to take a look at rates, so that will be a discussion. I don't think we're ringing the alarm bells that we're going to immediately just go out and raise rates because we're just starting the season. We don't want to throw a big monkey wrench in the middle of that. But we will be discussing them, and maybe we set rates that we'll implement at a date later on, possibly even the beginning of next season. So that's yet to be seen, but that's something we will discuss. And then one other big need up at the golf course is we have some really old equipment. I mean, kudos to our mechanics and our staff for keeping that stuff running for so long, but we have had to defer equipment replacement for a few years because we've had some large capital projects up at the golf course. And so we're at that point now where we really seriously need to look at replacing equipment. And equipment for a golf course doesn't come cheap. So it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace a few pieces of equipment up there. So we'll be discussing that. And then one other big project that we're looking at is hole number 3. There's been a lot of talk. That used to be a par 5, and it was converted to a par 4 several years ago. Well, there's been a lot of interest in getting that back to a par 5, and we have plans to do that this year. So we're going to start early on the new green, which is the existing practice green down there on the end of 3, and we're going to start preparing that for play, but it won't be in play early on this year. And then come August, we're going to take the par 4 green out of play, and so there will be some disruption on that hole, and we're just asking people to be patient with us so we can get this done and just work around that hole for the last little bit of the season.
It's great to have golf course goals, though, and to have a great team in place. They're excited about it because municipal courses around the country can often wane because of public, disinterest.
Yeah, and we rely on the public interest, and we're glad that we have happy customers now. I mean, we struggled for a couple of years with staffing, and unfortunately, it's not the place to have an understaffing level. Revenue is dependent on how much people enjoy the course and how playable the course is. And if it's not there, you're going to wane. And so the golf course is an enterprise fund. It is designed to pay for itself. We're not quite there yet, but we want to be as close as we can to that. And we have to have a nice, aesthetically pleasing, playable golf course, and that takes staff. Good news, we anticipate to have full staff again this year, and they did a great job last year. I think they really turned the course around because they had the staffing to do that, and we want to keep that going.
That's great news, James. Thank you. Of course, really thanks to John Carr, who's managing the club, the bar and restaurant, and then Rick Longhurst, who stepped back in as the pro.
Yeah, so Rick is well known in the area, and he was a golf pro for a long time at Ruby View. And then he decided he was going to attempt to retire. I don't think he truly retired, but he bounced around at some other golf courses. I think Winnemucca was one of them, and Spring Creek. And he's back at Ruby View for now. He's got one more year left on his contract, and we're happy to have him. And we'll see what the future holds with Mr. Longhurst when it comes time to renegotiate, or maybe he passes the baton on. I'm not sure, but we're happy to have him for now.
Thank you for the update, obviously, and thanks to John and Rick. Great partnership and teamwork up there to get that golf course in the best shape. So that's really that feels good, right, James, to have at least that one going forward.
It is,
yeah.
And it's in a good place right now, and it's definitely going in the right direction, and I'm really relieved and happy about that.
Well, you've also, I think, added new folks to your Recreation Advisory Board. You've had some people who've really hung on there, and that's nice. And then they do some lifting and looking over the budget that you have planned.
Yeah, so that's a 9-member board. We do have one vacancy on that board right now, and we have for some time. Katie Nedenrip resigned quite some time ago, and for, I don't know, whatever reason, maybe I'm a little lackadaisical in it, but we haven't had any interest in it. So we are still recruiting for one position on that. If anybody's interested in serving on that board, you just need to state an interest and maybe some of your qualifications and why you want to be on the Parks and Recreation Board, and you can submit that letter of interest to the city clerk down at City Hall, and we'd be more than happy to look that over and possibly get you appointed to the board.
Excellent. I want to make sure we're getting to everything on your list today, James.
Yeah, we are. And speaking of the Parks and Recreation Board, we have a meeting on the 28th. So we normally would have met in January, but with the pool project out there and in the air, that's the big elephant in the room, and I think a lot of things stem around getting that done and getting that developed. So we've postponed the meeting for a couple months, and we're finally getting around to that. And we will be looking at a tentative 5-year capital improvement plan for parks and recreation as well at that meeting.
All right, so that's a big one, and the community is invited. I know that advisory board members and even elected officials who contribute their time, they really appreciate seeing community involvement, whether or not they're getting the kind of feedback that they want, but any kind of feedback sometimes helps in that direction.
Absolutely, and it can sometimes be frustrating. I mean, the projects in the Parks Department don't come cheap. They're a lot of money. They take years and years of planning and design and funding to see to a realization. So we have a lot of people on that board that have been on there for a long time, and there's a lot of projects that we've been talking about for a long time. So with the sports complex almost in our rearview mirror for a period of time, we can start spending money on some other things. And that's kind of my goal and my recommendation, is that we start knocking off some other things that have been on that list for quite a while. And we'll be discussing those on the 28th.
Does that, or could it possibly include the skate park? I know that was in the mix a while ago.
That's one that comes up quite often. It possibly could. I think there's probably probably some other things that I would propose ahead of that, but it doesn't mean that it can't be discussed and can't be brought up and planned on. We are going to try and finish some work in phase 1 of the sports complex. I know we've spent a ton of money down on baseball and softball, but it is an unfinished phase, and there are some crucial elements of that we really need to take care of to really truly call it a sports complex. So that's about $1 million expense right there to finish off a lot of concrete work and some additional landscaping around the phase 1. And that did come from some concerns in the public. It's been open for a couple of years now, and we got some feedback on that. Yeah, we had to cut some things out to get it to where it is today because of budget, but I really want to finish that off. So that's probably tops in my mind. And then we refer back to our master plan quite often, and we look at those goals and objectives, and we try and tie projects to those goals and objectives. And one that is particularly been on my mind for about 15 years is we have a little piece of property up on the top of Stitzel Drive, and it's meant to be a neighborhood park. That is a unique corner of our community that doesn't have a lot of service in terms of outdoor amenities on that side of the city. So small piece of ground, very achievable to get done, and I'd like to see that one incorporated into this next 5 years somehow, and finishing that park for that neighborhood up there, give them a little bit of a green and open space up there to go enjoy. And then there's there's always things on there. There's some of the mundane things that people probably don't really think about, but there's parking lot maintenance that we have to fund every year. There's weed abatement that we have to fund every year. Weed abatement is, in particular on this list, comes from our goat grazing program, which is a very efficient means, and it's really cheap in the long scheme of things in tackling that weed issue. But there's so many things on the list. The Warnick football complex, for example, we've had some design work done on that in, I think it was 2017. And that's kind of been shelved for the time being, but there's a big expense and a need up there in terms of parking lot, slope mitigation, drainage, and all of those sorts of things. So the list is huge. You can go all the way from A to Z, and I think there's things that have been talked about for multiple decades that we haven't been able to get to for whatever reason. So it's kind of a challenge in a way. It's kind of it's an interesting discussion to come up with a plan and see it through to realization. But nonetheless, we need to plan and we need to discuss and keep moving forward. And then there's always these things that just kind of come out of nowhere. A good example, I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere, but the dog park. It's something that we had talked about for years and years and years, and we'd had some significant discussions on where that might be. And so where the little park on 5th Street is now our dog park. But really how that came about was we've had several citizens that were interested in that before, but I think we finally found one. Her name was Darcy, and she was hell-bent on getting this thing done, and she attended public meetings, and guess what? I got the direction to go fund that and get that done. So that's kind of how it works. You can plan all you want, but every now and then you have these things that kind of come out of the blue, and we go do them.
And you have a lot of happy dogs and dog owners. That dog park is very well used there on the 5th Street area. And I should mention, too, that you did conduct a survey, and I don't know if those have been released recently, but it would be cool to know what people think about their parks and amenities, right?
Yeah, so we did start an update to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It started last summer. We are very close to the end of that, and so we'll be revealing that shortly. We did get a lot of public participation in the survey, and I don't think there's anything really new or blaring in there, but it was good information to have, and it just backs up it will back up our goals and objectives going forward in that master plan. And so we'll be sharing that soon. It'll be out for public reading here shortly.
Oh, that's cool. That's it's always important that the community knows too, James, that they've been able to help inform the decisions of this Recreation Advisory Board. Certainly your staff, which is small but dedicated. You know, we didn't even talk about trees. I think we can have that conversation in the future. We're a Tree City USA. And wanted to end on this really happy note too about because the City of Elko has this fantastic reputation for amenities, parks, recreation, the things that we all enjoy. NDOW has come, and now the urban fishery is closer than ever, and maybe that could be an offset for some of that encumbered land that the museum wants to expand on, you know, if we develop that urban fishery right there in the city limits.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that project up. It's one that I haven't put in this tentative 5-year plan, but I do anticipate it's going to work its way in here one way or another, 1, maybe 2 years down the road. It's still in the planning stages. I'm not sure if that one would qualify as a conversion in far of an encumbered parkland. It could, it might, but we'll have to look at that. It would be, NDOW is purchasing the property, and so I don't know if that will quite work as a conversion, whereas the city would have to purchase that and then do that. But anyway, it's going to be a partnership between NDOW and the city, and I'm looking forward to this. I will mention that this urban fishery is not new to the Elko area. When I first got here 17 years ago, it was being pretty seriously discussed back then. So just to give you another idea of a project that's been on the list for a long time. So, but I am looking forward to the partnership with NDOW. I think the city will partner with them on developing some of the infrastructure that goes into making that a park. NDOW will manage the pond and the fishery, and also do events down there. And so I think it's going to be a fantastic asset for the community. I have been associated with one other urban fishery in my previous job in a different state, and I was able to participate in that from the ground through construction to seeing it being realized. And I can tell you that they are very, very popular, and it's a great opportunity for people that don't want to drive 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 3 hours away to go fish. It's right here in your backyard, and it's a good quality experience for everybody, and gives a lot of opportunity to those that may or may not get out into the outback of Nevada.
Yeah, I know Julie Gabrielson and NDOW folks are super excited. It could be an outdoor classroom for them. And so just so you know, listeners, it is in the works there in the area of, I think, was it called Stitzel Pond? Shuckman's ice, not Shuckman's, but the ice ponds there off of 12th Street access, Sharps access, that's it.
You get to the top of the 12th Street Bridge, Sharps access.
Yep.
And so you can see the pond down just off of the bridge right there. That is the pond that NDOW will initially be rehabbing and developing for a fishery. I do believe that they have plans on expanding it a little more out, and so we'll have to wait and see what that looks like.
Yep, more green space, and it all enhances that connectivity. Thinking of Dennis Crooks right now and what he envisioned for the city. Wow, Dennis, you just have no idea. This legacy lives on, connecting Humboldt Area River Park, that whole trail out to the sports complex, and the California Trail Interpretive Center's designated hot hole now is an official pioneer site. So,
yeah, absolutely, and there's people working on trail systems around the area too, and that will include the Harp Trail. We want to bring some connectivity to that from outside of the area. I know that I was asked to sit in meetings with a group that's spearheading this trail development. I know that they're focusing on getting a link from basically from the hospital over to Spring Creek and various other locations. So it always starts with a vision, and it starts with some pieces and being put in place, and then it makes it a lot easier to build upon if you've got some building blocks ahead of you. So yeah, you mentioned Dennis Crooks, and I know that was one of his legacy projects when he was a planner here, and we're going to see some movement on that. We want to connect the end on the west end of the Harp Trail to the sports complex. There's been talk about taking it from the hot hole either to Carlin or to the California Trail Center at some point. We also want to connect under the 12th Street Bridge to the apartment complex there, and now with that urban fishery being there, that would make a lot more sense to get that done sooner than later as well.
Thanks, James. Again, with the willing partners and the vision, as you said, it all starts sometimes with just this dream, and then you have to have the city officials who you can work with. So thank you for helping everybody out on all these. You're making more work for your whole department, aren't you?
I'm pretty good at that, and they'll tell me that.
Well, we didn't get to talk about Snowball. I feel bad about that, but just a quick nod to Snowball. You will come back, right? Because it's early in the season.
Yeah, we have some projects planned for some improvements up there. It's mainly electrical, but we had a great season. We struggled a little bit with the amount of snow early on, and that may have pushed me into making a decision to close down a little early, because as soon as I closed down, we got hammered with snow. So if you go up there now, you're probably going to ask yourself, who had the lame brain idea to close down Snowball? But
It's a gamble.
I feel a little bad about that, but that's how Mother Nature works sometimes, and sometimes she doesn't cooperate.
That's all right. It's a great place, and we'll talk more about that too in a future program. James, thanks so much for being on with us today. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And all your energy and all your leadership. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for another edition of Elko Live here on KELK.